We are live. We made it to 2024.
Hmm.
How are you feeling this morning?
I'm feeling really present. I'm feeling spacious. I was just telling you that both my partner and my child are out of town. And so the two closest people to me, both, physically and emotionally, are away. And that leaves me with a lot of room, both physically and mentally and emotionally, to explore. So I'm feeling spacious and open.
That's nice.
Mhm. What
I
about you?
yeah, I feel more open today than I have the last few days. Yeah, as you know, leading into the new year was very anxiety ridden for
Mm,
me. I had a few waking up in the middle of the nights, feeling anxious, feeling like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, like physically having sensations of anxiety and that constriction and the like, oh my god, what's
mm.
gonna happen?
What's at the root of that?
I mean, the state of the world, the uncertainty that lies ahead, um,
Yeah.
in the Middle East, with climate, with the pending elections in the States. I mean, all of that is just like,
Did you see Michelle Obama's? This is a complete side note, but very related to your point. Michelle Obama's recent interview.
no.
So it just aired yesterday, and um, the interviewer asked her, what keeps you up at night?
Oh God.
And her response was literally that. It was, honestly, it's the things that I know. It's the things that I know about climate change. It's the things I know about wars and regions. It's the things I know about AI. And, being in the position that I'm in, obviously I have access to a lot of information, and those things genuinely keep me up at night.
Oh, well, that's not very
Yeah, I know. Everyone was like, okay,
exciting.
so if you're anxious and you know all these things.
But the thing is, there's all of that, which I can do very little about,
Right.
except in my own life, you know. But I think the other thing is like a lot of old patterns of feeling like I'm on my own,
Mm,
that I have to be like hyper independent, that
mm,
um, that struggle is a part of business, like that I'll never be fully relaxed or accepted as I am. Like
mm,
those things are kind of the underlying anxiety. And I know they're old patterns because when I actually wake out of my, like, as I wake up to the new day and it's not the middle of the night and I'm in my
mm.
subconscious, when it's the new day, I'm like, I already know those are patterns that are no longer the
Real.
truth of
Right.
my moment, but I have to remind myself. And yesterday, you and I had a call with our accountant, and we had a great year last year. But I have this internal like, you didn't do enough,
Mm-hmm.
and not you didn't as in we didn't, you didn't as in Aaron didn't. Um, and you were like, we got this, it's all good, and you were calm, and I can't tell you how much that meant for me because um, this morning I woke with one of those like subconscious kind of like, and literally the phrase, "You need to do this all alone," and I was like, whoa.
Interesting.
That's not true anymore. We can relax.
Hmm.
We can relax. But yeah, some of the old patterns are very, very loud. So,
That's how
but
you're feeling. No,
well,
that's not how you're feeling this morning.
yeah, this morning I'm feeling a little bit more like observant to all of that,
Mm-hmm.
conscious of the patterns, and more distanced from it. You know, so there's like hope, there's hope and excitement now starting to creep in about the new year, and also trust. Trust is a big word for this next year for me.
Mm.
Anywho, that's a lot of rambling as it usually is. Anywho, so so we both are the sorts of people that download like 50-page resolution books, or like
It's so funny that you sent me yours because I was like, wow, I'm literally one third of the way through mine.
um and instead of, like just setting intentions or resolutions or whatever, which is already an overachieving thing to do, we take it multiple steps beyond that and write little books about what we hope the year is going to look like. And when we met for our first day of work and we were talking about how we were feeling about the new year, you said, actually, I have a lot of questions coming into this year, and maybe do you want to talk about what questions mean to you right now, and
Mhm.
just in general the process of questioning and how you've been, building your relationship with that?
Yeah. I think while going through that process of um, the 50-page resolution book, which by the way, I'm still not done. And I worked like, I did, I think 7 pages yesterday, but the way that mine is structured, do I have a
Oh
copy?
my God.
The way that mine is structured is you have 2023. So there's like an introspection on 2023, which in and of itself is like 15 pages. And then you have 2024, which is 15 pages. So I finished 2023 about 2 nights ago and started 2024. And in my starting of 2024, and even in my wrapping up of 2023, to be honest, I was having a hard time moving through questions like, okay, what are some themes for this year, or words for last year, or I had more questions essentially than anything else. Um, and
Is that typically how it is for you at the beginning of the year?
no, I tend to be a cyclical person. I tend to cyclical in that I like new beginnings. I like new weeks, new months, new years in terms of birth years, new years as well in general. But I'm really trying to reframe my approach to that, and I appreciate the social conversations around wintering and just like going with the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my inability to think forward, and actually in my inability to think solely about me, to be honest, I feel like there's so much happening in the world that it felt a little bit hypocritical of me to be like, yeah, I want to be successful this year.
Mm.
um, I told myself, I put the 30-page book down and I wrote up questions that were getting in the way of me being able to answer any kind of forward thinking or think about things in a more futuristic light.
Mm-hmm.
Remembered that in our work, we often talk about the importance of questions. And I had read and returned to, and I'm still returning to right now, this book called A More Beautiful Question,
Mm-hmm.
which is such an amazing, amazing read. And it really is just reminding me and has reminded me of the importance of questions as um, building blocks
Right.
and as avenues and as roads and as doors. So that's where I am in terms of like New Year's and resolution setting. I'm really, really going with it with more questions than answers this year. And I think that will be my motto and my approach.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Did
yeah,
you did you happen to read the description for this event?
no, I didn't.
um, I'll read it to you because regarding like in our work wanting to integrate more questions, I mentioned that in the description. What I said was, often with clients and partners, the instinct is to want to skip the question part of our strategic work, wanting instead to get into the nitty-gritty of planning. Danny and I often remind ourselves and the folks we work with of the power and potency of sitting with questions rather than jumping for answers. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's so much to be gained from taking a pregnant pause and getting curious, especially at this time of year. What if we didn't rush to resolutions and the New Year's pressure for action? What if we went deeper? What if we asked why? What is it we aren't seeing? What have we missed? What could we be surprised by?
Mm-hmm.
And
I love that.
well, I mean, we essentially co-wrote it because at this point, like,
What I
my
say, what's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. What words are yours?
um, but
Yeah.
as I started writing those questions down, I was just like, there's there's so much we're not seeing when we're trying to jump past. There's so much we're not seeing when we're trying to jump past the questioning part, and also the urge to want to jump past it comes from that anxious place oftentimes. um, the one I was talking about earlier that you wake up with of like, oh, it's not enough, or I'm behind, or I need to do all of this right now, and I need to do it alone, and we don't realize that that sense of urgency is coming from that internalized um, sense of not enoughness. Um,
Yeah. And I think that internalized um, sense of I have all the answers, or I'm supposed to know all the answers.
right.
And I think most of the times, if we're speaking from an organizational perspective, leaders do not. Hence the importance of constant feedback, hence the importance of assessments, of checking in, of co creation.
Hmm.
And then I think as it pertains to our individual lives and our situations collectively, it's like we have no idea what the future is going to like. No one does. And so, trusting that for me anyway, there's some form of higher power that is behind all of this. And, um, the same force that is guiding the seasons is guiding whatever it is we are moving through collectively.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
is helpful for me as a reframe and as a reminder that this is something that I can't have control over. Because as someone who needs to control, be it in a position of leadership in my life, in my intimate relationships, that level of surrender
Mm.
is a practice.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, we've already said so many of the pillars of white supremacy culture.
I was thinking about that.
So let us all remember that as we're writing down resolutions and we have that sense of urgency and we have that need for perfectionism and we have that feeling that we're supposed to have all these answers, that those feelings have been internalized because it benefits capitalism, because it benefits systems of dominance, because it benefits the powers that be that need us all to be cogs in a machine that perpetuate the um, you know
Fastness,
yeah, and the
productivity, efficiency.
it benefits the systems that want us to be making things so that others can make money. um, so yeah, yeah. So anyways, the practice of, like, you said some beautiful words there. You're talking about um, believing and knowing deeply in a higher power, feeling that sense of intuition, surrendering, trusting, listening. Uh, you said co-creation. It wasn't within the context of what you were just talking about, but some of those keywords are or could potentially be the antidotes to this like rat race that we're all in that serves no one. So could we step off of that? Um,
Hmm. What questions are coming up for you?
for the new year?
Yeah.
Well, you don't know my questions yet. I know your questions. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna share. So we both entered into the new year going back to work. Danny was like, I have questions, more questions than answers. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I wrote down some questions as well. And so she shared hers. They're really, really powerful questions and unsurprisingly, um, very inspiring and community focused. And you're going to see my questions are much more I.
It's important.
Well, it's important. And also, you know, I have this feeling that I have this feeling that I am the only thing standing between myself and my feeling of we-ness.
Mm. Can you say that again?
I feel like I'm the only thing standing between I and we-ness and we.
Mhm.
And I want to move, and I've been intentionally moving over the last few years towards more of a mentality of we,
Mhm.
as in trust and wanting to be in deep partnership and wanting to be much more vulnerable and like really lean into intimacy. And what I keep learning is like all of the blockages to that live in me.
Mhm.
And I have to recognize them, catch them when they come up, the guards, the defensiveness, the fear. Um, and and I want to live in we, you know. And I yeah. So anyways, my
But also
question.
I sustains we.
Yes, but there's a healthy I, which for the most part I spend a lot of time in. There's like the self-awareness and self-expression and
Mhm.
um, authenticity and like a love of self that I think does inspire the same from other people. But then there's also the fearful I
Mm.
of so many of the things I've already said, but like I don't
Right.
want you to see me. I feel like I need to do this alone. So, anyways, a lot of my questions are about I for the new year. Um, and that's my preface. So, um, anyways, my questions are
Mhm.
uh, can I choose trust with you, with my life partner, with myself? Can I choose trust? Can I relax into the moment? Can I hear myself more clearly? Can I meet the person in front of me with curiosity and playfulness as though I don't know anything about them?
Mhm.
Especially with people that I like, it's easier for me if I don't know someone, but
Mhm.
especially with people I'm in close relationship with, it's like, can I get more curious? Because I actually don't know, you know, my family members, for example, as or my best friends or you or like, there's so much more to discover.
Mhm.
Um, can I sink in a little deeper? Um, can I become we?
Mm.
Which, as I'm rereading these, like, can I become we feels like a very, very important one. And then I have one how might I question, which, for those of you who don't know, when you frame a question or you start a question with how might I or how might we, it is, do you want to explain, Danny?
Yeah. Essentially, um, reframing an observed problem um, by starting a or observing a problem and reframing it rather with a how might we or how might I or how can I question opens up the avenues for solutions and for innovation. So, for example, you know, I don't like going to the gym in the winter, which is the first thought that woke up that I had when I woke up this morning. And the reframe to that would be, how can I make going to the or movement in wintertime enjoyable for me? So much more spacious, much more curious. Um, yeah, much more helpful reframe. So
Thank
what's
you.
yours?
Well, there's a little preface to this one as well. I have a few kind of core statements for the new year. One of them being choose trust, which is why one of my questions is, can I choose trust? Another one of my core statements is wild artist, just and free. When I think about myself actualized,
Mm-hmm.
I am a wild artist who is committed to what is just and who is committed to what it means to be free. There's like a,
That's pretty.
my, as my art feeds my work feeds my art. And anyways, so how might the wild artist show up to this?
Mm.
So,
Those are great.
oh, thank you.
I'm curious. They're great. I'm curious why you only started that last one with a how might or how can I.
Well, at first I was kind of like, like they're unedited. It's like,
Right.
you're kind of like, can I? And then I was like, they're starting to like become more concrete as the deeper you go. Like, can I sink a little deeper? Can I become we? And how might the wild artist show up to this? It's like my mind has started to formulate more concrete thoughts
Mm.
at that point.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean,
Because all of them, while you were reading them, I was reframing them in my head. So, can I choose trust? I was like, what would it look like for Aaron to choose trust?
in many ways, I think like asking the questions, I think for me, it's a practice of not necessarily coming up with the answer, but just asking it out loud
Right.
to begin with. Because I think I've been making my way towards choosing trust
I think so too.
for some time, and um, it's like one step along this journey that's already been undertaken
Mm-hmm.
to write it down. But I do like, there's some in here that I would love to pick and like be held accountable to, when we're in our creative processes or whatever. Can I choose trust is more an internal one, but can I become we? Can I sink a little deeper? But yeah, they're not as concrete or answerable maybe as some of yours. And I feel like the
I
spotlight.
think they're more.
Well,
Are you kidding? I think they're much more concrete and answerable. I don't have the answers to, I mean, yet. I'm still they're emerging slowly, but I think starting with I makes things a lot more actionable, you know? Because if we shift into mine, my first one being how do we balance our intuitive need for slowness with the seemingly pressing urgency of these times? It's a big fucking question.
unsurprisingly.
Right. And to be honest, I actually
Say it again for the folks who might have missed it.
yeah, so it's how do we balance our intuitive need for slowness? And preface that I actually hesitated. I have my last one is about I, but I was like, okay, are these more about me or are they more about us collectively? And I think that if I'm feeling this question, a lot of people I know are also, that's also one that's coming up for them and one that Drew and I spoke about in our last conversation. But so how do I balance our intuitive need for slowness with the seemingly pressing urgency of these times?
I mean, being
Don't
in
answer it.
no, but I not for me, but for you, I just wanna let you know that being in a relationship with you, I feel like, this is something that you carry with you every day, and when we think about the impact of asking these questions for ourselves and what that means for the collective, like, the impact of you, the ripple effect of you saying, "Can we go slower?" You know, the notion of pregnant pause, which I included in the description, it's your kinda like it's one of your, like, core values with the work.
Hmm.
Um, so it has great impacts for the people around you, for you to balance it for yourself and,
Mm,
um, you know, significantly impacts how we're building the business and therefore significantly impacts how we show up with the people we work with, and, like, who knows the ripple effects of that afterwards.
yeah. But you
Uh,
see, I think I've gotten really good with owning the slow, which that in and of itself has been an adjustment process. But then the other side of that, and I think the most pressing question for me is really the urgency of these times. It's, I like to go slow. I need to go slow. I like to think about things. And I also recognize that, the pressing urgency of these times require us to show up, require us to. Our friend Drew yesterday posted how he took 10 minutes of his day just to call up his representatives and leave voicemails and just like write it up. And I was like, that's so cute. Um,
cute.
not, not cute. It's very cute, but I'm like, that's so amazing, that I'm like, okay, I also need to make space for what's pressing right now in my day to day. Which to me, I tend to compartmentalize, right? I'm like, okay, this is slow season, everything is slow, and then we'll move into fast season. But I think right now, the pressing urgency of these times it's slow season and there are things that are pressing. So how do I embed the pressing in my day to day or my week to week?
Yeah. Yeah, and, in that, there's, like, because there's so many different ways that you could show up to what's pressing,
Hmm.
and so many different ways to exert finite energy. So, if the slowness feeds the moments of decisiveness where you make choices about how to show up,
Hmm.
um, but it's like, what is how can I best use I'm thinking of this for myself, so I'm not, like, imposing it on you, but, like, how can I best use my natural strengths to show up to what is pressing right now
Hmm.
so that when I'm in action, it's flowing and meaningful.
Right. And my natural strengths for me sometimes being, writing and communicating
Mhm.
and um, requires some sense of organization and planning for and not shying away from and owning up to. So the ways that I can best show up for these pressing times require me to own that and make space for that in my slowness. Yeah, ultimately balance.
Mhm.
So that was question number one. Question number two was, how might we honor our innate deservingness of joy while holding the ever so present heaviness of our collective grief and suffering? That's a big one for me. I think for most of you know, our networking community. It's, how can I keep showing up on social media about the small little things so that my page doesn't become a news page and there are so many things that require us to amplify, so many things that feel heavy.
Mhm.
Does my cute little dinner even matter?
Oh, it matters.
I mean, yeah. Um, so again, making space for that balance, you know, I can hold and show and display all the facets of my life without feeling like I'm letting one side down by placing too much emphasis on the other, you know.
Mhm. I mean, if you remove social media from that equation, what does
Even
that
yeah,
what does that question look like?
more hobbies. More hobbies that don't involve learning and
50-page self-reflection worksheets.
self-reflections on Friday nights. Fun. Like my friend's DJing tonight, and I'm like, it's Wednesday, my partner's out, my kid's out. I can go to a bar and just have a good time. And then on the other side of that, I'm like, or I can write and reflect on the state of the world.
Let's go to a bar.
You're down? Yes, I'm absolutely down. I need more people to be like, let's go to a bar. I need my friends to be like, look, literally, I shared this with a friend the other day. I've had during the break, a lot of friends just reach out, being like, what are you doing tonight? Let's go play games or let's go for dinner. And I was telling them that's so helpful for me. Like last minute spontaneous reminders are helpful for me because they prevent me from planning, you know, well, yeah, let's go on Friday, January 16th, between 4 to 6 p.m. So more of that, more of like, let's go to a bar, please. Hold me accountable to that.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
pleasure.
not a bar, but you know, let's go play games. Let's go thrifting.
Yeah, I know, because people are annoying at bars, but I wanna go to a bar, and then you go, and it's like, ah,
But also both of us aren't drinking right now, you know? Like I'm doing dry January, you're
sober-ish. So
soberish.
sober mostly. Um,
Okay, last one. How do I respect my growing need for intentional community without dipping into us versus them rhetoric that further erodes our social fabric?
why are those,
Opposing
mhm,
because in my thinking, I've observed that wow, I follow a lot. Like I went down a rabbit hole the other day of accounts that I don't follow and that think nothing like me because they're really of the exercise of like, okay, let me try to embrace different opinions. And I found it extremely challenging. I found it extremely challenging for me. I'm also finding it extremely challenging, you know, to have certain conversations with good friends or folks that I considered good friends. Um, and again, I know that's a shared experience for many folks in our space right now. So I don't want to I don't want to slip into us versus them, into me being surrounded by people who only think like me, who only believe the things that I believe in. Because I think I was sharing this with you. It's easy to be around people like that. It's easy to love the people who are reflections of me because they're me. Um, the hardest thing to do right now as a society is to extend that same compassion and grace to the people who don't think like us. And so, you know, catching myself slipping into echo chambers, and as someone who's worked in democracy, knowing that that's the most harmful part of our not part element of democracy is echo chambers of, you know, people who think the same and how that amplifies what you see, what you read, what you
right.
so holding myself essentially to that same regard, to those same expectations, and woo, that's hard.
Yeah. Well, having just rewatched your live with Drew, which was really fantastic and so full of nuggets. But there was one section where you both were talking about, so the live was about embodiment and how you can practice how um I want to frame this I want to frame this but well how powerful it can be to recognize your body as a tool for
Mm,
self-awareness, as you engage in meaningful social change, as you engage in social justice, as you engage in collective liberation, as you engage in the work of unlearning um, how these values of dominance show up in your life. And you asked Drew a question about shame as a tool and how shame is often wielded as a tool, but the way that shame lives in the body is extremely restricting, defensive, guard. Like if you don't want someone to move from I to we,
shame
you
them.
shame them. If you want someone to stay in the I, like they've done something, it's just shame them. So what you were talking about during that section was, first you talked about like how shame lives in the body, which was fascinating. And then you both went into talking about the language that's used to actually invite people in. And you
Mm,
wanting to Drew, you were saying, you like kind of laughed about it and you're like, I'm thinking about this as a marketer. Um, what kind of language are we using and how are we actually inviting people to be a part of this? How are we opening rather than closing these conversations?
mhm,
And Drew was talking about some of the protests that they've been to and the calls for shame, and how Drew decides, like, not to rechant shame and instead thinks, what else could we call? Join us, reimagine, uh,
mhm,
shift forward, or, there were a few examples given. So I feel like you're really like one of the perfect people to answer this question of how can you create community without perpetuating us versus we, because first of all, you're a great community builder. Secondly, you have a marketing background. Thirdly, you've worked in democracy. Like there's so many elements, you're
mm.
primed. You can answer that question today. We could do a 30-minute brainstorm. You'd have a bunch of ideas.
Thank you. It's really helpful. It's helpful. It's helpful to have your skill sets mirrored back to you, um, as reminders that you have the tools to show up in these times. I think that's my biggest block. Sometimes I feel like I constantly need to learn because I don't have the tools. I need to be better equipped, and you're so good at reminding me that the last thing I need is another fucking degree. Although I'm literally applying for one right now. But
It's that time
um,
of year. Apply to degree time.
God damn it. Oh, thank you though. It's helpful. I think to start wrapping up this conversation though, as folks are starting to do their strategic planning or wrapping up their strategic planning or um, planning, some form of planning for the year essentially. I know that organizations don't necessarily have resolutions, but they do have strategic pillars and strategic focuses. And a conversation that I had with a dear friend the other day was, for their strategic directions, she also had a lot more questions than answers. And I was telling her that, and we've been talking about using questions as avenues for strategic shaping, as building blocks for innovation, how the how might we framework being an actual innovation practice in the innovation space. So I think that's a good exercise for folks who are leading these conversations, facilitating these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The question
Completely agree.
arising.
Yeah, and on that note, because our banner says the seed, and it says find out more about the seed. For those of you who don't know, Danny and I have um, co-designed and worked with some amazing collaborators to build our first online program called The Seed. And The Seed is an EDI program, essentially, and any other things. Personal development, there's professional development in there, there's community learning. We've designed it for community learning, for community conversations. And it's a 5-module program. I'm not going to get into all the details right now. The reason I'm bringing it up is because the 5th module, which sums everything up, is called Moving Forward with Intention, in which we talk about the importance of taking a designer mindset and using a designer mindset to think about where you go next. So now that you've acquired all this knowledge about yourself, about the dominant systems at play, now that you've thought about where change could happen in your personal life, in your community, in your office team, what have you, how do you take active steps forward? And we spend time in that 5th module, Moving Forward with Intention, talking about how designers reframe problems into questions and spend time with those questions. And whenever we have this conversation with the people that we're working with, it's such a rich, beautiful, eye-opening moment for people to realize how aligned they are, how different the language is that they use to talk about the same challenge. There's so much that can be gained from that question section. Yeah. And the final note on The Seed is that we've decided to, initially we were going to host it January 22nd to February 22nd. We entered into New Year feeling like that felt rushed, like the timing wasn't right. We didn't want to push it through during a season when people are overwhelmed. And we've decided to reorient it more so for a spring sort of program. So it's going to be March 4th to April 4th.
Germination season.
Germination season, which makes complete sense. Complete sense.
Yeah.
So find out more about The Seed, join us, ask us questions, take your time with your own questions. Closing thoughts?
How much everything that applies to the personal applies to the organizational. You know, everything that applies to the I applies to the E. Everything that applies to nature applies to human systems.
Mm-hmm. I'm also struck with how much you already have the answers if you take the time to ask the questions, and how much, like, to the point about like not needing another degree or whatever. Of course, like advancing your mind is a beautiful thing. But we all want to take steps forward from a place that feels like we are enough, you know, that we are important as we are, rather than feeling like we need to edit ourselves and edit our life in order to be valuable, which is not the case. And honestly is one of the tools of capitalism, especially at this time of year, that makes us feel like we need to set resolutions of changing our bodies, changing our schedules, changing the way we show up to everything. So yeah, enoughness.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. I mean, that word in even of itself creates tension in my body. So that's an interesting one to sit with after this call.
The answer is go to a bar.
See you tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Also sing, draw, write, feel, move.
And lean into community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. I love you lots.
Love you lots.
Yeah.
Happy New Year, everybody, if we haven't said that.
Yeah, we haven't.
Slow New Year, restful New Year, intentional New Year.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm ending our stream.
Go.